Jamie, let me know when we're being recorded. Good evening. Excuse me. Good evening. We opened our September 21st, 2020 Harwich Board of Selectmen's meeting at 6 o'clock this evening. We then went into executive meeting in which we discussed strategies for contract negotiations for non-union personnel, finance director, and police chief. I think we're nearly complete with that discussion. We may have one more and we'll finalize those contracts. After that discussion, we move back to open meeting. And I would like to start our open meeting with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Our first order of business is the weekly briefing, COVID-19, and I turn to Joel, but I assume you're going to turn it over to Megan. Is that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, there's obviously some timely information, and I will go right over to Megan Eldridge, our Public Health Director.
Good evening, guys. I'm hearing myself again.
Well, we can hear you too, so you're fine.
Okay. Since the packet information was put in on Friday, we've had one additional case, putting us up to 148 total, and we're now currently following 2 active cases. One is almost through with their isolation, but is still currently active. So we have 148 with 2 actives. I'm sure you've all seen the newspaper about the issue at with some students at Monomoy. I just want to let everyone know that the health department was involved with that every step of the way, and it turns out there's just one student who was positive and at school during an infectious period, and Monomoy Regional School System has done a wonderful job of contact tracing and helping with the nurses to figure out all of the close contacts and make sure that everyone who needs to be notified has been notified, and that they are being followed by the VNA and quarantining as required. So I'm happy to answer any questions about that incident. And if you don't have any questions about that, we can move on to some questions about annual town meeting.
Any questions about the Monomoy? No, just I guess again, our appreciation for working with the school to sort this out. And I thought at least the way it was reported in the paper, very calmly stated that procedures had been placed in advance and were followed. So it's good to have.
Yes, they did a great job. They have all their procedures in place, and they went a few steps beyond what the CDC and Mass Department of Public Health require as far as quarantining goes. Just to be on the safe side, they expanded that 6-foot circle a little bit, and it should turn out that everyone who is at school is safe.
Thank you, Megan. Is there more?
Not with the school. I've seen some questions about town meeting and mask wearing, and I wanted to update you all as well as the residents and anyone attending town meeting that masks are, as we've talked about, required when you're moving about and until you're seated. However, if people are walking by you to go to a microphone, you should put your mask back on even if you are seated. And the Massachusetts gatherings order does indicate that if you have more than 10 people at a gathering, that everyone should keep their masks on at all times. town meetings are one of the exemptions, but if, to be on the safe side, it would be prudent for everyone to keep their masks on throughout town meeting, if at all possible. And that's it.
Megan, don't you think it would be wise just to say we want people to keep their masks on? I mean, I think people will be.
I do think,
Well, why don't we?
I do think that it's wise.
Why don't we just mandate it?
My only hesitation is the Board of Health has not mandated that through their executive order, their emergency order. It's something that it just doesn't say that specifically in their order.
Well, if there's some way we can strongly suggest, I think it's a mistake not to tell people to keep their masks on. I think a lot of people are going to be very uncomfortable if folks walk in, sit down, take their mask off. I just think, I think it's a mistake. So that's just my opinion.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just follow up on that, building off of what Selectman Ford has said, I'm not sure if you've heard it yet, but there was an automated call that I recorded last week to continue the communication effort about town meeting on Saturday. I know that the remarks were also shared in other social media and things like that. My message was that we'd ask everybody to wear face coverings and have them on at all times. So that is the request, if you will, that's coming from the town through administration, that we have asked them to keep their masks on.
Michael?
I think it's fair, I think it would be fair for this board to take the position right now that we would like everybody to wear their masks throughout town meeting. And that would be hopefully picked up by the news or social media at this point and relayed. At least it's my position. And it sounds like it's Stephen's position.
I agree, but Don,
Yeah, to Michael's point, for what Stephen was saying, I appreciate, may not appreciate it when I get home, I appreciate the dilemma between the Board of Health and the Board of Selectmen, but this is our large gathering, the town meeting. I mean, if we wanted to make a narrower ruling than the Board of Health, I don't see what the problem is. If we wanted to actually go beyond what they have suggested and give exemptions out that the Board of Health had not given, I would see a problem. But this is just asking, since it's our meeting and it's our jurisdiction, it's asking everybody to wear a mask, everybody. So I'd make that motion.
we're,
Okay. So
Steve?
I'll second the motion.
we have to see how we get that phrase out, other than just what, we're requesting or mandating everyone wear
Well,
masks.
if you look on the cover of the warrant, it does indicate that face
Masks are
coverings
required?
are mandatory.
Okay.
So we haven't
So we'll
changed-
the
follow
Board of
that. We have the
Selectmen.
language. So we'll
Yeah,
follow
but now we're voting on it because we
We'll
didn't
vote
vote
on
on it.
Let me ask you, Megan and Joe, are I think we talked about this early on, will we have volunteers helping direct people and
Yeah, I can give an update on that if you'd like. We had our.
because that'd be a perfect time to say you have to wear a mask.
Yeah,
too,
we had
make
our
it
latest
personal.
logistics meeting on Thursday, and Deputy Chief Considine has confirmed that the CERT team that worked the Chatham town meeting microphones will be working our town meeting, so they were able to distribute the microphones, they sanitize them between use. They know the drill, so to speak, if you will. When people are checking in, we'll be reminding them that they need to have their masks when they're picking up their warrants. So there's several opportunities where we'll be reminding folks that they should have their masks on. We also have the motions meeting on Tuesday, so I'm sure I can convey to the moderator the sentiments of the board. And I'm sure the moderator will do his part and speak to town meeting.
Okay. So we have a, Michael?
I do think the sentiment of the board is appropriate. I'm not sure, based on the agenda item
We can
and
vote
how
on
it is,
this.
that we should be taking an official action. I think that we've taken an official action by all of our comments, but I'm not sure that we should take an actual vote. And I do think it would be appropriate to ask the moderator to announce that it is the sentiment of the board that you keep your mask on. There's a lot of people in the crowd that would be uncomfortable. And Don, I did look into the body of the packet, and it does mention annual town meeting is scheduled for, and so there's some content in there, so there probably is some gray area on whether or not we can take an official action, but I don't think it's appropriate.
What if we were to ratify the cover that already existed within the conversation of the warrant? not changing the language at all, just say that the board affirms the language on the front page relative to masks.
You could do that. You could do that.
I have a problem with that. I mean, I think we have it on the warrant now mandated, so
Yeah.
we're,
And I think we sent our
Saying
message.
that.
I do think we've sent our message.
Just one other thought, they're not super expensive. I would highly suggest we lay in a couple of boxes of these. Because
Yeah.
they come at 50 to a
I
box.
was just going to ask if we had any intention to distribute masks.
Megan, you had,
I have,
you have a supply?
yep, I do. I have a few hundred on hand if people forget their masks.
Great, thanks, Megan.
so, if I understand now, we have a motion to confirm our
Confirm
warrant,
the printed front page of the.
confirm a warrant article mandating masks.
It's not a
I'll-
warrant article, it's the cover.
I'll second it.
The article directions.
It's the cover
Cover
page of the
directions.
warrant.
There's a second? All in favor, Steve?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Ed? Don?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so and along with the volunteer help, we should, what else we can do is send strong messages.
Sure.
Megan, you want to, is there more?
That was all I had, unless there's questions from you.
I have none other
Yeah,
than that.
just a thank you as always, Megan. Fantastic job.
If I could take the
Oh,
liberty
you
of
go
doing an
back.
update on the logistics for town meeting. So I think today you will have seen that there are signboards that are reminding everybody that town meeting is this Saturday. We're asking voters to check in as early as 9 a.m. We'll have the e-poll, the poll pads, which allow for electronic check-in directly by the voters. Wonderful technology that the clerk has offered up. And the beauty of that is we'll know as quickly as possible when we have quorum for the moderator to start right at 10 a.m. So again, there's information on the website and will continue to be information. We're asking anyone that's driving to approach 75 Oak Street at the southern entrance. That's the way you would go in if you were dropping off a student. It's also the Little League ball field entrance. Follow the road around the building and find the nearest space. We have ample parking for handicap spaces. Ample bike parking is there as well, and pedestrian access can come in from the northern exit, but it is going to be a one-way route. And staff will be there as early as 8. Voters will probably be there earlier than 9, and we should be able to kick off right at 10 a.m.
Okay.
There'll be 600 warrants available. We'll have more than 600, but 600 warrants that will be stuffed with a handout. I don't know if you wanted me to talk about that handout now, Mr. Chairman, but.
Please, go ahead and do that.
So the handout is, first of all, it's going to be the motions that we are aware of at the conclusion of the motions meeting on Tuesday. That is to say, all of the positive motions being made by the Finance Committee, as we understand it, and any other motions that the moderator was aware of by petitioners. I don't know that we will have a motion printed as it relates to the operating budget or the school budget, depending upon how the discussion goes this evening. But because we're unable to project the motions as you've seen in years past, the handout will have all of the motions. Because it has all of the motions, we'll be recapturing, or we'll be capturing all of the roll call votes taken by the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee, as is my understanding now is required to be in there. So that will be added to that booklet. Any errors and omissions that need to be corrected as scrivener's errors will be mentioned there. And I know the Finance Director is going to add some helpful finance sheets. So the effort there is to give the voters as much information as possible. We will have motions books for all of you on Board of Selectmen, for the Finance Director, myself, and the Finance Committee Chairman. Your books will be slightly different. For each motion or each article, you'll have a one-pager. It'll show the article language in the warrant. It'll show the motion being made. If it's a fund balance, Carol's already updated that information, so that'll be right there on the sheet. Excuse me. I've already worked with staff and continue to work with staff on adding narrative information to that one-pager. And I know you were going to talk about assigning articles to members of the board, so we'll make sure the board members have those narratives as well. The intent is everybody will have as much information up front at the time of stating the motion as possible. We'll still have our department heads available to answer any more questions and any other committee chairs or what have you that can speak more in depth than what the one pages will have.
To continue Joe's thought, I asked Joel, as he mentioned, has met with department heads to get information on the warrant articles. I've asked Joel to send each of us those drafts from the department heads so we can look at them. If you have questions or want additional information, can ferret that out before the town meeting. I really want us to be as prepared as possible. Department heads have given us, I'm sure, a lot of good information, but you all may have some other questions that you know have come up. Let's share those and be sure that we gather that information before the town meeting. So Joe will do that as a draft. We can take that as a draft and add to it. Joe, I have a question about the one item on the meeting itself. Can we maybe pick some volunteers around, especially towards the back of the ball field, and have them listen and raise their hand if there's any sound problems? So
Absolutely.
so we
Yeah,
have some
we
sound
actually-
monitors that we're,
Yeah, we have.
because we wouldn't know that always from up front, that if they can hear or not.
Right. We will have plenty of people available for that. I know that the clerk is going to have individuals at the gate, so we'll have extra CERT team members that can roam around as well, and
Okay.
other staff members,
Okay.
for sure. Yep.
You want,
Well, I know the board had this when you came in this evening. I believe it's the assignments for the members.
these are assignments I sent you, and they're, some I had some inclination what the interests are. A lot of them are sort of arbitrary. If you disagree with it, let me know, and I'll try to reassign them. Some of them I doubled up because I think there may be enough interest. I want to be sure there's more than one person. I think our goal this year is to really go to the town meeting prepared to answer questions. Michael?
Just back to the logistics, Joe. Has anyone gotten anywhere with the school on moving the buses?
Yes, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Superintendent Carpenter called me right back. The buses will be moved, well, their last run Friday, they'll be sent to another location, so we'll have ample parking. So that means we should have about 372 spaces for 470 seats for 600 booklets.
Okay.
So,
Perfect.
but thank you for that, I appreciate it. reminder.
You know, just then, continue the town meeting. Let's have a selectmen's meeting. Joe, if you can post it, let's meet at 8 o'clock at the Snack Shack. And that way we have items to discuss. It'll be posted and it'll be out in, it'll be public because it'll be out in the open. Michael?
You want us there at 8 o'clock, 2 hours before?
10, I'm sorry, 9 o'clock.
Thank
I
you.
was thinking 9 o'clock was, well,
We're gonna have to jog
my mistake, don't panic. We'll be at 9
Not
o'clock.
panic, I might
Oh,
be
you
late.
know,
the, yeah.
Mike,
9 o'clock.
We could meet at 8 and then go to breakfast.
Where can I place my camping gear the night before?
Yeah, no kidding.
Okay, let's move on, Joe. 9 o'clock.
Very good.
Post that.
So noted.
More, or should we move to?
That's it for COVID-19, and I will just give a nod to Cindy. I know she has a very quick update for us, I believe, and I think that's appropriate. Cindy, I hope that's made
Good
sense.
evening, yes. I'm sorry, Joe.
Go right ahead.
Good evening, yes, I thought I would keep it short and sweet tonight. Nothing new to really report. There are people still around enjoying themselves. We'll have more to discuss next week when we go through what'll be the next steps for the restaurants as the week unfolds and as things get colder, and we need to discuss that. So that is it for tonight.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. Michael?
Just to follow up my last week's question, has anyone clarified CDC's position on sides on tents and heaters? And have we given any direction to the restaurants?
If I can just jump in on that, Joe, for a second. Yes, Mr. McCaskill, we have looked at some of it. There are some things still coming out. The rest, and Megan and I did discuss it, and she has sent an email out to the restaurants, but there's still a couple of things that we need to work out this week with fire, et cetera. So more to come on that for next week.
Thank
And
you.
if I can build off of
Joe, if I may,
Who's speaking?
Fire Chief David Blank.
Oh, gee, okay, chief.
we'll be putting out guidance, and we'll be doing courtesy inspections with the restaurants that are running tents. We are going to allow heaters inside the tents, provided they meet the operating instructions of the heaters and clearance to combustibles. But we're putting guidance together, and we'll have something out this week for all the restaurants that are using tents.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Joe, did you?
And I was just going to say, as you know, with the guidance that came out through ABCC on September 11th, you will be discussing on your October 5th meeting, ahead of the November 1st deadline, what actions, if any, the town wants to take to extend outdoor eating for the duration of the emergency. The order says for the duration of the emergency, including up to 60 days after the closure of emergency. So we're going to have a more in-depth conversation about that as it relates to beyond November 1st on October 5th.
Okay, thank you. Any discussions? We'll move to public comment. Update on personnel, Chief Gildamet.
Evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, can you hear me okay?
I can. You're coming through a little garbled, so I guess speak slowly.
Okay. I just want to publicly announce a couple of noteworthy events related to two of our special police officers. The first being John Sullivan Sr. I know many of you probably know John. He's worked for the town now for 40 years as a special police officer, and at the beginning of this past summer decided not to seek reappointment into that position. So I just wanted to, first of all, obviously thank him for his 40 years of dedicated service to the police department and the community of Harwich, and just give him a little quick background of quite an extraordinary man and an extraordinary career. He started as a school teacher for his primary career was a school teacher for the city of Boston in 1965, and did that for 36 years. And about 10 or 11 years into that, he became interested in public safety. He became an EMT and a special police officer in his hometown of Medfield. And that until he was picked up here in Harwich right around 1980 and started working as a special police officer in 1980. Is that okay?
Yes.
We can, yes.
Okay. So back in the day, those special police officers back then actually augmented the force on the road. So he was actually working the road with full-time police officers for a number of years. And then towards the end, it was the time just before I arrived, the special police officers obviously not working the road anymore, were working details and assisting us with special events and such. But John has had a tremendous couple of careers, and I just wanted to really send him a congratulations and a huge thank you from the police department. And we sincerely hope to be able to give him an in-person send-off as soon as we can get to the other side of this COVID situation.
Extend our congratulations, obviously, and it's too bad we're stuck apart.
Yes, yeah. And the second real quick announcement is that, as you know, you folks appointed Jennifer Harrington as our new animal control officer several months ago. And as part of that deal, Jennifer had to attend the Reserve Intermittent Police Academy in Plymouth, which actually started January 8th. And you do the math there was a small event that occurred in March that kind of threw a wrench into her attendance at that academy. So it's been a very long haul. But just about 2 weeks ago, Jen finally graduated from that intermittent academy after they went back into the classroom and completed their studies. So she's going to be sworn in as a special police officer, so she'll be able to have full police powers as she performs her duties as the animal control officer. And I'm really, very proud of her being able to complete that in very extremely difficult circumstances. So congratulations to Jen. And I thought the board might want to know both those personnel issues. So that's it for me.
Michael?
Yeah, congratulations to both personally. And just one question, Chief, and maybe through the town administrator. We did discuss a new dispatcher. Have we started that process? in looking for a new dispatcher, or are we still on
Well, I
hold
know
on
Chief and
that?
I had talked about it. Chief, I don't know where we're at with that position.
Advertisements are out.
Great.
Yep. And thank you for that.
Any other questions for the chief? And always good to hear good news, chief, so you're welcome at any time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Next on discussion is the fire chief. And there he is.
Good evening, can everybody hear me?
We can.
So this last week, we were presented with an opportunity, just a little bit of background. We've done most of our fire training at the Barnstable County Training Facility. It's off Mary Dunn Road in Barnstable. And through a variety of reasons, location, water department areas nearby and everything else, some pollution that had occurred in the past, that site has been closed down to the fire academy. And as a result, they're kind of looking for a new home. But they also successfully wrote and received a grant for a new live fire burn building, a burn prop. It's made out of storage containers. It's about 24 feet wide and 48 feet long. Uses propane and theater smoke, so there's no pollution, no hazard with it. It pretty much stays contained. And they're looking for a location for it. They're trying to do something up at Joint Base Cape Cod, but they have some concerns about the distances departments will have to travel. And talking with Phil Burt, the possibility of putting it behind fire headquarters came up in Harwich. And I spoke with planning and conservation, the building department, some of the other town agencies, DPW, water department, about the logistics of getting this done. At the end of the day, it's a very feasible opportunity and presents a tremendous advantage for our fire department in being able to do live fire training essentially in our backyard. And also with what we've always been about in Harwich, at least in the fire department, and I think townwide, of supporting the greater community efforts, so that we would enable the other fire departments would be able to come use this facility and train out back. So there's some information in the packet about it. Where it's going to go would be behind the old DPW building, which is behind the police and fire headquarters now. There's plenty of room back there to do it. And it seems like a win-win for me, and it just really kind of looking for the consensus of the board to continue forward with this project before we spend a lot more time and effort. If we can't do it, then they're going to have to find another location. So I don't want to drag it out too much longer because the grant is time sensitive.
Thank you, Dave. I'll look for comments from the board. Dave and I talked. I think we always want to bring these types of discussions to us and to the public early on to get input. And as Dave says, what looking from us is, what's our view? Michael?
I think it's a great idea. I think the packet is very complete. I was going to make a motion unless we want to get into comments first, but
I don't think we need a motion. We just need a consensus that we're okay moving ahead.
I was going to move that we support the request of the Harwich Fire Department to collaborate with the Barnstable County Fire Academy for a training facility located at 175 Sisson Road. Second. And it is only, the motion is only for support.
Consensus, because I've intentionally left off a vote this time because I wanted this to be a discussion and that we're in agreement, but I'm okay with that. We have a second. Any other points? I mean, I think Davis is a good argument. But you can talk, Don.
This is in support of it. I mean, it's not only bringing back a service that the county had lost to the rest of the Cape, but just to point out, when we were doing that, so the public can focus on this, when we were doing that, we were sending people away from our locality to do the training there. I mean, we will essentially have use of this in between whenever any other town is using it, and we don't have to travel. I mean, that's better for our downtime and overtime situation.
Ed?
Yeah, I discussed this with Chief LeBlanc, and I think it's a great idea. I was involved while I was representing Harwich on the Assembly of Delegates in the study committee that reviewed the old police fire academy, which was a great facility, just not in the best of places, as it turned out, with the issues of water quality in the area. But the facilities they had there were very good. Unfortunately, none of them were portable. So having this unit here, I think is a very good deal for our town and our training of our employees on a regular basis, and keeps the training facility here on the Cape rather than having everybody have to leave the Cape to do it, so.
Steve?
I would just echo the comments by these guys. I appreciated the chief reaching out, giving me a full idea of what was going on, and I think I'm supportive of this, definitely.
Michael?
I just want to add, I think it's a great statement from this board for the training of firefighters across the whole Cape to be done in the town of Harwich, as well as the cost savings to the town of Harwich. But I think it's a testament to how we feel about our firefighters, but not just our firefighters, firefighters throughout the Cape, and the importance of the training. I think it's an absolute no-brainer.
Dave, what are your next steps?
Listening for our vote.
So I need to have a further conversation with Phil Burt. The county has approved the match already, so it's pretty much green light go at this point, and needed to really get the support of the board on record. And I'm sure at this point, the lawyers will be involved, and there'll be some kind of municipal use agreement that has to be drawn up between the two sides so that everybody understands what everybody's expectations are. And I think that's only reasonable. I've indicated to Phil that I would like to manage the project from the Harwich standpoint. And he's completely on board with that. He's very supportive and very thrilled that this was even an option. He said a lot of people expressed interest, but nobody put any effort forth in trying to get it done. So the fact that in a very short period of time, a couple of weeks, we're to the point where we're at now, and the support that you gentlemen are putting forth is really appreciated on the county level to try and get this done. And really $700,000 grant by the county, and potentially going to go to waste if they couldn't find a place for it.
I know we have to take a vote yet. I have one follow-up question. Do you require anything from us, a letter with this, our full support, or some action?
No, I don't believe so. I think once we get into the agreement, there'll be some official language that has to go back and forth. But I believe right now, based on my say-so and the action of the board, that'll be enough for Phil to start doing what he needs to do on his end.
Okay, thank you, Dave. That being said, we have a motion and a second. Ed, you want?
Yeah, I think the point that Michael brought up being important, this being important for the entire Cape, is also, I know most of the volunteer departments are at this end of the Cape, and this is a little bit closer for them than the old location, and certainly Otis or going off Cape to Plymouth would be. And I know they always had issues with trying to get adequate training for their employees.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Just so you're aware, too, the grant is co-written with the Provincetown Fire Department. The county itself can't write the grant. They need a fire department to sponsor it. So Provincetown is the sponsoring fire department for this grant. And to Ed's point, it puts it much closer to Provincetown and much more usable to them than it would if it was at Joint Base Cape Cod or anywhere else further west.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm going to take a roll call vote now. Steve?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. So thanks again, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
And,
Thank you very much. I appreciate the support.
Thank you. Joe, we now move to, we move to consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as follows. A, approve minutes for July 6, 2020.
Second,
Second, any discussion?
just quick.
All in favor? Don?
I just wanted to quickly say, reaffirm what Michael had said last week. These are a substantial upgrade. They are terrific, and they
very
continue to
detailed.
be terrific.
I agree.
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Michael?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Joe, I'd like to move to new business now, and item A, which is joint meeting with the schools.
So, Mr. Chairman, as you know, having heard from the school committee chairwoman, this will not be a joint meeting of the entire regional school committee. However, there are several members of the school committee, as well as Superintendent Carpenter and Mr. McMillan, the business manager. And this is following up on our discussion over the last several weeks, and follows on a discussion of the regional school district's finance subcommittee meeting, which met last Thursday evening. And our regional school committee is set to vote on a matter on Thursday relative to the budget. So at this point, you have in your packet, I think it would be appropriate if I turn it over either to Chairwoman Gaines or to Superintendent Carpenter for their presentation.
Your choice, Superintendent or Ms. Gaines?
Yes, I'm going to, I will open this up. This is Tina Gaines, the Chair of the Monomoy Regional School Committee, and thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. I am joined by my school committee colleague, Terry Russell. Both of us are Harwich members and residents and taxpayers of Harwich. And we are here to present tonight the Superintendent, Scott Carpenter, and our new business manager, who I don't think any of you have met yet, Michael McMillan. So it'll be a wonderful time for him to say hello. But they're going to present to you, based on my understanding of your questions and your concerns. We have a presentation tonight that I hope will answer some of your questions, address some of your concerns. And all four of us will be here after the presentation to answer any additional questions and clarifications. So with that, Superintendent, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tina. Before I start talking about budget, I think it's only important to publicly share some affirmation where it's due. And I just want to tell the town manager, the board, you've got a gem in your health director, Megan. I think to put things into context, I had another superintendent from Off Cape call me today to, they're finding themselves this morning in the little predicament that we found ourselves in this weekend, and was just trying to process, what's my advice on how they move forward. And I think my experience in working with Megan through this pandemic, is not what I think every superintendent experiences with a health director. And I think Megan's just quick, proactive nature has been a way that we're able to keep our schools open. I think it's that seamless flow of information. So I really appreciate working with Megan, and I think we're in good hands with her there in Harwich. So thank you very much, Megan, for your support over this weekend. I know that we had a very busy Saturday, and I appreciate you jumping on this really early in the morning to help us get to where we needed to be in terms of managing this case for the schools. So that being said, I'll shift to budget. So do you have the slide deck that we sent you? I'm just trying to see what you have, and does it get presented or displayed, or how does that work in this format?
We have a slides, fiscal year 21 budget, September 2020. Is that the proper?
Scott, if you have it handy, you can share it on your screen if you wanted to. I don't have access to it. I'm off the network right now.
Okay, so if I
dated September 21.
My screen share, I can do that?
It should work if you share your screen, correct?
Just give me 1 second. It's asking me to open a system preference.
I think you're right.
We have it, but I think he wants to show it to the audience as well.
All right, I think I can now share it. So oh, lovely. Well, we'll have to do without me sharing my screen, because it says in order for me to do this, I have to restart my my GoToMeeting.
Why don't I try? Should I try and get it?
Sure. If you can, if you're able to do it on your end, Michael.
You got it.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Mike. So, so if we can just go to the second slide, Michael. So this slide is just one that we've shared a similar one with our school committee at our school committee meetings. I think the last time we were really presenting budget information publicly to the Harwich Select Board was back in January, and it was Katie Isernio and I presenting that budget information. And a lot's changed since January, as we all know. I thought my biggest challenge was going to be Katie retiring. Little did we know that COVID was going to impact the schools and towns as it has. We went and over the course between January and heading into the summer, Monomoy Regional reduced its budget by nearly $500,000. To be precise, it's $497,191 is what we reduced the budget by heading into Chatham's town meeting in June. And our school committee subsequently voted to approve sort of that revised budget. So if you want to flip to the next slide, Michael. So that revised budget ended up having a Harwich Harwich assessment would have gone up by 1.19% over the prior fiscal year, and Chatham's was going down. And we had discussed in our prior budget presentations how that's largely driven by a shift in enrollment. If you recall back to the budget presentations in January. One of the things that we did as a school district is sort of recognize that, and I think we're in this challenge on both the school district side and the town side. We needed to increase the amount of excess and deficiency, or some of our reserves that we were using to help offset our budget. Given the challenges that running the school district is having during this pandemic. So our excess and deficiency has increased to an expenditure of $850,000 over the prior fiscal year, or $850,000, which is a 55% increase over the prior fiscal year. So if we can jump to the next slide, Michael. So just to give the select board just a little flavor of some of the challenges we've been dealing with through this pandemic, and some of the challenges of running the school district through this. This summer, the Department of Education mandated that all school districts in the state offer parents choice between a full distance learning option or some form of in-person learning in their schools. So essentially this year we're running two parallel school systems. We have a distance learning school system that we're running at the elementary, middle, and high school level, and we have our in-person learning that we're running in our classrooms, in our buildings. And we have 75% of our families have elected for that in-person learning. 25% of our families have elected for the distance learning option. In order to make that happen, we had to add staffing for these virtual learning classrooms. We've had to increase some of the staffing in the buildings because we've had to decrease density in the classrooms to have everyone 6 feet apart so that we can only have class sizes functioning at 15 children in them or fewer. The other thing that's clear that we've needed as we've gone into this school year is to increase our nursing staff and essentially double our nursing staff so that we have 2 full-time people in each building each day, because you have the nurse who had her full-time job in the past, and now you can imagine every child that ends up in the nurse's office is likely presenting with some COVID symptom. So we have the children end up going to a isolation room, and we determine if we need to go and send the child home and work with the family on the next steps if we're concerned that the child may be COVID positive. So it's taxing the district on that end. The other thing that was important for us to look at is we have to keep in mind we've got a new high school, but we have 3 buildings that are 50+ years old, our 2 elementary schools and our middle school. And it was pretty clear going into this pandemic that we're dealing with an airborne vector. So we wanted to make sure early on that we were dealing with our HVAC systems and making sure that they were running as built or even better than when the buildings were built 50 years ago. Because as you've seen in the media, HVAC and the ability to go and have fresh air coming into internal spaces has been important in terms of managing infection. And the last thing, an important thing here, we've also had to purchase additional Chromebooks. As schools have gone to distance learning, having that one-to-one has been important. And the last thing that's is something that we've needed to purchase is just this PPE, the personal protective equipment for our healthcare workers, but also for some of the staff that work in close proximity to certain children where they can't be outside of a 6-foot range. Next slide, Michael.
Scott,
So
if I can I interrupt you? I think Don has a question.
It's not so much of a question, Scott, as much as a point of reference. I know you weren't here, but the elementary school in Harwich was gutted and completely rebuilt, especially as to the ventilation system, in 2005. It was the last SBA project that was done right before the moratorium. So as a factual matter, you may have a 50-year-old school in Chatham, but you do not have a 50-year-old school in Harwich, except for some portions of the shell that remained as it was gutted.
And thank you for that history, Don. True, I didn't know when the renovations were on HVAC in each of the buildings, but I think that ongoing maintenance is an important thing that I'll swing to in another couple slides. So one of the things that we have been lucky through this, and I know that the town also is seeing some of this as well. There have been grant monies that have come in to help municipalities offset some of the coronavirus-related costs. So on the school side, there's a coronavirus relief fund that the district has been able to see $389,000 in funding. There's an ESSER fund where there's $169,000 available, and a remote learning tech grant of $15,000. Next slide, Michael. So given that, the bulk of those grant funds we've actually already expended just in supplies and maintenance costs to manage different coronavirus related things. Everything from purchasing the PPE to some major HVAC maintenance throughout the district to purchasing a significant amount of plexiglass so that we have dividers that we have as you walk into an office, that there's much the same way that you see when you go into some stores where you'll have plexiglass between you and a store clerk, that we have that between some of our clerical staff or a librarian. In some cases, we have these portable folding plexiglass dividers between so a student and a support person can be working in closer proximity, but there is that barrier there. Next slide, Mike. And then I know that, or I've heard that there's been some conversation about, well, what sort of capital needs would a school have, given that we have been, been closed, and you can't see me using my air quotes when I say closed, that, that the schools have been closed since March 13th. The reality is our buildings have been open and we've been in operation. We've just been doing a couple different things. We have been feeding families all through this, since March, all through the summer. And the other thing that we've been doing is just preparing our buildings for students to come back with an extensive amount of HVAC work. And then we have also been really focused on our Chromebook, making sure we have enough Chromebooks, and also that we have the right instructional technology for our teachers to be able to be remote. Next slide. So one of the things that that I think our taxpayers in both towns can be very proud of is our district has been leading the way when it comes to education during this pandemic. We launched into the spring as one of the only school districts that was connecting face-to-face every day. And I went into this with my non-starter is we have 1,900 families or 1,900 children in Monomoy. And I expected that we would go into this, meeting with those kids face-to-face every day and supporting them. And this was at a time when even the Commissioner of Education was not talking about doing things in a face-to-face manner. And most districts were coming out with sort of asynchronous assignments put on the web. While that was happening in a lot of places in the state and across the country, our families were meeting face-to-face, and we were sharing out to other school districts how this could be done. But it was able to happen because our two towns have invested in technology in the schools over the years. So we were already one-to-one middle school up through the high school. And we took every computer we could possibly get our hands on to go and get those into elementary families' hands when we were remote this spring. We're again leading the way this fall. So there are other school districts that are still trying to figure out how to bring students and staff safely back into buildings. And once again, our teachers are providing students the most in-person instruction of any school district in the region right now. We are supporting families with younger children, pre-K through 7, with full day in-person instruction every day of the school weeks. It says 7 days, it should say 5 days a week. And we are also maintaining our complete and rigorous high school academic program so that we're offering that full range of academic options for our high school students, despite pandemics throwing at us. Next slide, Michael. The other thing that we can be proud of, and I think be proud of, and I think this gets back to what Don just brought up. There are other school districts, including our neighboring school districts, that have had over the years different approaches to maintaining their buildings. Somebody asked me that the lower picture here, they thought that was Harwich Elementary School, and that's Wicks and Dennis, but it's the difference between buildings that have had HVAC systems maintained over the years, and HVAC systems that were jumped on for updates and as we went into this, we went and had a crews in getting every rooftop unit, every univent functioning. I was telling the school committee, I said I doubt there are many superintendents in the state that can go and say that every component of their HVAC system. Every exhaust fan, every univent, every rooftop unit is functioning, and that every window that is operable can open in every building that they have. That's what that's happening, that is what we have going on in Monomoy, and that's one of the reasons that that we're not dealing with some of the HVAC issues that you see in other towns. But again, it's because we have been doing the best we can to go and make sure that all of our buildings are in good shape, and it's not just something that happens overnight. As Don said, when you go and invest and make sure that you have those HVAC systems up to snuff, and that you're not refreshing them every 50 plus years, but jumping on them over time and thinking about it over the long haul. It kind of sets you up for success when things like this this happen. Next slide, Michael. One of the things that I know has been just a bit of conversation is just fund balances of, and I'll say that these are sort of reserves and other accounts that lead to long-term fiscal stability. And one of the things I just want to point out is I think a lot of times there's conversations amongst the finance committees on what is Monomoy's excess and deficiency, which is somewhat equivalent to free cash for both of the towns. But we just wanted to share what those balances were going into this budgeting year, so that we were looking at close to $2.1 million in that excess and deficiency account, of which we're using $850,000 to offset the FY21 budget. We've got $36,000 in that stabilization account. It was $50,000, but we used some of that stabilization money this past year to reimburse the town of Harwich for the demolition costs of the castle in the clouds. And we have been slowly building up the OPEB amount. But again, I think if you just look at these different types of accounts that provide long-term stability for municipalities, both Chatham and Harwich have a much greater percentage of those accounts that they've been able to go and build than the regional school district. And I do think that we have to think longer term about seeing the stabilization increase on the school side, so that we're able to defray costs of big projects down the road, but also to not lose sight that the school district needs to go and grow their OPEB. In terms of a school district can't go beyond 5% of its budget in excess and deficiency. Anything beyond, or at least for a regional school district, anything beyond that 5% needs to roll back to the towns during the budgeting process in the following fiscal year. Next slide, Michael. So there was a conversation that I had last week with Joe Powers and Carol Coppola, and I know that both my chair and the chair of the Harwich Selectmen spoke about reducing our budget, reducing our assessment to Harwich by $140,000. And just to let folks know that if we reduce an assessment to Harwich by $140,000, because we're reducing, we also have to reduce Chatham's assessment by their proportionate share. So a reduction of $140,000 to Harwich means that we would have to reduce the budget by $188,289, so that each partner is having a reduction in their proportionate share. So that would have us reducing our budget to what is the revised, $41,261,134, which is a 1.26 or 1.25% increase over our prior year's budget. Next slide, Michael. If we put this into how that impacts the assessment on both towns, reducing that additional $140,000 on the Harwich side for the assessment has Harwich's assessment going up by only 0.66% over the prior fiscal year. And it still has us using the $850,000, 440 of excess and deficiency. So I think that is the slide deck that we had for you. And if we can stop sharing, Michael, and go answer questions.
And Mr. Chair, before we go into questions, I wanted to touch on something that the superintendent didn't mention, which I think is important, because our school buildings have been open this entire time. Something that our community members may not know is we also at Harwich Elementary School had childcare happening. That was going on from the end of March through June and then all summer, where we had essential workers here in our town of Harwich that had no childcare, no way of getting back to work. So we have a YMCA program over there, and we were able to offer childcare. I think that's very, very important because I think the schools have been a wonderful partner during this difficult time for a lot of our families here in Harwich. So not only were we feeding them, we were also offering childcare for essential workers. So with that, we'll open for questions.
Thank you, Tina. Let me just say that I've been very proud of the way Monomoy's handled the whole COVID-19 pandemic, and especially on the recent discussions you've had with all the students and parents in the community, and arriving at a point where we can offer as much in-school education as possible. We've certainly led the Cape, and I talked to my daughters in other parts of the country. We're ahead of them as well, so job well done. I also very much appreciate, I know Tina, you and I talked last week of making an adjustment to the budget. That was an item we discussed several times with our selectmen, so I applaud the efforts on that as well. I'd like others for comments. Steve?
Yeah, mine is not so much a question, but just a compliment as well. I really appreciate how hard you have all worked at bringing this budget in a way that will help us on the select board side to provide what we believe is a, and I won't speak for all the selectmen here, but what we believe will be a pretty sound budget for the taxpayers, the residents of this town. Especially Tina, thanks so much for discussions this past couple of days relative to the 140, which is very important to us. And Scott, thanks so much for recognizing that, you know, this was going to be a difficult year and probably another one to follow. But you've all worked closely with us to attempt to help us get our budget to where it needs to be. So we appreciate it, or I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Other comments? Michael, do you have?
No, I just echo Stephen's comments and thank you for the work that you did to get us to where we are tonight. I think it's going to go a long way at town meeting, having support of the school budget from the board and us being on the same page. So thank you.
Ed?
No.
Don?
For another time.
Our goal, as Michael has inferred, and I think as our discussion in the past, is we very much would like to go to town meeting with a unified position on the budgets. That being said, do we want to make a move tonight to approve this budget so we can settle this?
Sure. Go from Joe first.
Joe, do you want to?
Well, first I echo what everyone has said about the cooperation. Dr. Carpenter, Mr. McMillan, Carol, and I have been meeting virtually throughout the summer, and certainly the last few weeks as we get closer to town meeting on Saturday. My understanding is that this proposal is still going before the full regional school committee Thursday evening. So I think until that time, it would be better for the board to adopt this number, if that's what it is, Saturday morning at your special meeting.
Point. Michael?
Well, I would just say that, you know, since there's a shot at this hitting the paper or breaking news, that I would move that we support the FY 2021 Monomoy Regional School budget as presented tonight.
Second.
And that way we can confirm that Saturday, Joe, but move ahead. Sure. We have a second. Terry, I want to say hi to you. Mr. Russell, do you have any, you have comments?
You're muted.
Thanks, thanks, Larry. Thanks to all the members of the board. I think Tina and Scott summarized where we've been the past 6 months very clearly. Tremendous effort from the whole crew here. So I'm proud to have been a small part of sitting in on the board for the last 6 months, wending a way through it. Someone once said this, how well everyone's done considering this is our first pandemic in our lives. So hopefully things for both groups will work out well for Saturday's town meeting.
Dana, do you wish to comment? Thank you, Terry. Dana, do you wish to comment?
Sure. We'll be meeting at the same time as the school committee. The finance committee will be meeting to discuss these numbers, and as long as Carol can tell us that they work, then I'm going to ask the finance committee to support them, and again, go in unified rather than arguing about it at a place we don't want to argue.
Well, we're counting on you, Dana.
Okay. Mike, we haven't talked at all, but you wish to comment as well?
Do you mean me?
Me and you. What did I say, Mike?
No, thank you very much. It was nice to meet you all for the first time. I'm glad it went well.
Okay, we have a,
Don's got a question.
Don, and Don, you go ahead and, Ed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since Michael's probably right that it is going to hit the newspaper and everybody's going to see it, I just want to reiterate to everybody, well, this is great that we have the cooperation, but in anticipation of a vote on Thursday, there is no Plan B. We have absolutely no money that we can devote to this from free cash, and it would wind up having to be an override if that were the case. So I'm hoping that everybody will join together so that we can go to town meeting, you know, unified.
Okay. Ed?
Well, I just wanted to take the opportunity to welcome Michael to our little family here. This is the first time you've appeared at one of these joint meetings, and I look forward to getting to know you. I knew your predecessor well. We built a school together, so I had a lot of interaction with her, but I'm sure we'll get to know each other well and continue providing good services.
Okay, we have.
I hope so. Thank you very much.
We have a motion and a second. Take a roll call. Steve?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Joe, we move next then to,
So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and
Cash
as
balance.
the efforts continue to get us through Saturday, September 26th at 10 a.m. for our annual town meeting in the early days of fall, I, excuse me, wanted to update the board and by extension, the town. We have numbers that came in last week on free cash. So what I've handed out to you this evening is the email that we received last week relative to free cash, which has been certified as of July 1st, but also walk you through some potentials as it relates to fiscal year 21 on Saturday, and then right after that, fiscal year 22, which, spoiler alert, I'll be providing you with the calendar next week for fiscal year 22. But you will see that the state has advised us that the free cash certified as of July 1st of 2020 is in the amount of $5,453,040. An eye-popping number, I think, when you first look at it, but as you'll see in materials that Carol has provided on free cash analysis, a significant portion of that amount is predicated on the original free cash dollar amount, which had been certified for July 1 of 2019, and that amount was $1,446,115. So I bring that up first of all because what we really have to do when we look at that number that was certified last week is we need to back out the 1.44 million, because as you know, we've used every cent of that to fund our capital plan, for fiscal year '21, and in certain instances, capital items that appear under the operating budget. So I wanted to have a discussion with the board this evening because I don't want people to think that we are now flush with cash, if you will. In fact, if you compare the total number we have, just seeing that on the slide for the regional school district, Chatham has a number where they're at 5.27 million. I think the difference there is that's their number after their town meeting. Our number is before our town meeting. So we would end up with about $4 million after Saturday in free cash.
Okay.
So I wanted to ask the board if you wanted to consider the use of your free cash from the additional amount in place of the stabilization fund. To do that, it would require a vote of the board to waive the policy.
Right.
But that's why I put this agenda on this evening, related to that update from the state, and to give the board every opportunity to discuss it before Saturday.
Yeah, I think that's going to merit some discussion, but Ed, you had a comment before we get there, or a question?
Just so I think people who are listening in understand, the $5.4 million figure is basically 2 years' worth of free cash certification.
And more, correct.
Last year and this year,
Correct.
we had the 1.4 million that you indicated we were using in this budget is essentially what was available from last year, which leaves us with 4 million that would have technically become available the beginning of July for us to spend. Typically, we don't spend that until the next annual town meeting when we do a budget, which would be next May. But if we were to use some portion of that out of to make up the shortage in this year's budget, instead of looking at the stabilization fund, it would leave us with some 3.5 million, 3.6 million, something on that order, which would still, in essence, be a free cash figure twice what we had this past year.
Correct. It would, yeah, it would come out to about $3.4 million, and as you've said, Carol has provided an analysis detailing where the free cash number has come from this year. And I wanted to speak very quickly for a moment on that, because there was obviously the budget turnbacks of 3.3 million. You remember that in the earliest phases of the pandemic, we instituted a hiring freeze and a spending freeze, and that was this was essentially the purpose for that, to make sure that we had monies in reserve, to make sure that we truly didn't know where we'd be at this time. So there was a number of budget turnbacks higher than years past. The 1.44 that Selectman McManus just mentioned, 416,000 in article turnbacks. I've been talking throughout the summer as we've worked on this budget, that the effort that Carol had worked on with the department heads. So that's why you see a higher than usual number. But to put it all in perspective, I just want to show how it compares to past years when you account for everything I just mentioned there. So try and blow that up a little bit bigger, but that's too big, Joe. Well, the bottom line is the following.
Well, it looks like the last bar is sort of probably slightly above the average.
Exactly. So you're looking at an average of about 3.5 million over the years represented there. And if you compare that with 2016, you can see that what we net out after a town meeting on Saturday, it's not the highest that we've been in that period of time. It's certainly above what we've done for the last few years. But I want to make it clear that this is not found money, this is not unexpected money. This is exactly what we were building our strategy on on March 13th and beyond, when we did the hiring freeze, when we did the spending freeze, when we looked at article turnbacks and all of that. And so, because we're entering Saturday morning with a new Article 4, which is typically your operating budget article, Article 4 this year is the use of stabilization. So as you know, if town meeting is voting on that, that requires a 2/3 majority vote. And as Selectman Howell has just said, if Article 4 doesn't pass, Article 5 is out of adjustment. So if Article 4 didn't pass and Article 5 is out of adjustment, I would be compelled to come right back to you and say, to balance our budget with that difference of $574,000, the only other source at this point in time is from free cash.
Ed, and then Don.
Yeah, just to finish up, the 574,000 is what we're currently looking at.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take into any, in any way, it doesn't take into consideration what our previous discussion with the school board.
Correct, not as of yet, but when you adjust for that, we're now, we're talking about 140 that could be applied to the stabilization amount, so that knocks it down to 434,000.
Okay.
So the high water mark is 574. The low water mark, so to speak, could be 434,000. But again, whatever the amount is, stabilization versus free cash, I wanted the board to have as many options available to you ahead of time for discussion.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make the point that, underscore the point that the town administrator said and go a little bit further. This was a conscious effort on our part, and Michael's been on this for a number of years, that we were spending all sorts of other revenue sources so that the true rate of growth of the government was like 7%. It wasn't 2.5%. We really took a hard look at that, and I'm glad we did, because that's putting us in this position right now. Part of our dilemma moving forward, and it hasn't been said yet, is that we haven't been able to peg what our receipts were in some of those areas, like rooms taxes, meals taxes. And we will by the time we get to the next town meeting, which is why I'd be willing to take a risk. Now, the final thought is, everybody in this room knows, and probably everybody's watching, when you take something out of your savings account, it's not always going back. This stabilization fund was a conscious effort to put money aside for a rainy day. I would sooner see us use the free cash and get down to what would be, as Ed would put it, a historically consistent number for free cash, knowing that it was the money that we had actually banked from this year by being austere in the first place. If we take it out of stabilization, I really worry that we're not going to put it back in stabilization necessarily, but we'll have a better gauge as we go into May's town meeting, just where we are, and we can take appropriate action. But I think this is a really prudent way of going at this. It doesn't rely on a 2/3 vote. We do have the money. It brings us to historic levels, and it's not like we're full of money. It was because we took some draconian measures back in November and December that resulted in building this up.
Other, Michael?
Just back to what Joe had said, the 574,000 is our shortfall, right?
As far as, right, we've balanced the budget, but it's predicated on $574,000 being voted under, use of it under Article 4. If that then passes, that's what's baked into Article 5 operating budget.
Okay, and then
574,000 from stabilization.
Okay, and last week when we discussed the school budget, or 2 weeks ago when we discussed the school budget, it was noted that if we voted that budget, we would be an additional 142,000, I thought the number was, short, and that we didn't have the money to cover that. The capital, actually it was the capital assessment, Joe, 263, that if we voted that, we would not have the money to fund that. So in my mind, that 142,000 was in addition to the $574,000 shortfall, not reduced from it, as Ed mentioned. Correct?
That's what I thought.
So if I follow you correctly, so the 263,000 in the Monomoy budget is being funded through free cash.
Right, and we,
So if we
It was.
reduce their
We've reduced
assessment.
it.
Of which we had none left.
but we
Correct.
had no money
Correct.
left, so
Correct.
it was mentioned, I believe by you, that if we vote this, we will be in it. We don't have any money to pay for this. And I believe Dana DaCosta spoke on that as well. So I believe our shortfall, without the school's money, would have been 574 plus 136,000 or 142,000.
135, 136.
Not
yeah.
minus, as it was just mentioned.
Maybe Carol can, Carol, do you want to weigh in on that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So when you were discussing this 2 weeks ago, the free cash had not been set yet, and you were 140, actually it was $146,000 kind of overspent or over allocated in free cash, which is, I think, the reason why the school committee and the superintendent were, engaged in conversations, and that's where the $140,000 came to play. So 2 weeks ago, that is true. If you had voted that budget, you would have been short by a little more than $140,000. So you could choose to continue funding the school district's capital, the $263,000 with your new free cash, and reduce. It's just kind of a card game here, and reduce your stabilization, but it's all coming from free cash. So if you decide to vote that this evening, so essentially, what Joe's saying is, it's correct. It's just that the circumstances have changed with regard to the certification of free cash.
Thank you, Carol. I just wanted to clarify that it wasn't 574 minus 146. The minus 146 or 140, whatever number we arrive at,
Separate category.
is now being taken up by the school committee, and I view tonight as an offer that they were going to pay that. So onto the free cash. Historically, Don, I get your point that we planned for this. We've also had a detailed conversation about FY 2022 looking a lot worse, or potentially looking a lot worse than FY 2021. And if we go back to our 5-year plan, which we're going to talk about later in the town administrator's goals, on year 5, we were $2.8 million in the hole prior to the pandemic. And on year 2 of the 5-year plan, we were already into the negative prior to the pandemic. And I think we do have a stabilization fund for a reason, and it is a rainy day fund, and we have already voted and we're going in to use that money. We could very easily make a commitment tonight that our first order of business for the town administrator is to make sure that we replenish that money next year. So we're not just $574,000 in the hole this year. Our actual loss is a lot higher than that. We are using projected revenues at this point, Joe, I think, on short-term rental and some other numbers. And we're not putting any money in stabilization. We're not putting any money towards OPEB. And I think that this newfound money, free cash because of our hiring freeze and spending freeze, should be used as part of our plan to make it through FY 2022. And we should continue on the course that we're on and allow the voters to make that decision on whether or not they're not going to. I think that it's responsible to say that with the new free cash that we will commit now to paying back what we take out of stabilization and hopefully add some more. But why change midstream? I mean, we're almost there. We're almost at town meeting, and we have always done free cash for the following year. And I do believe we're getting ourselves into a hole, a continued hole over the next 5 years, which it shows on the plan, by using all of our free cash every year, and by including that into some things that should be in the operating budget. So we have yearly expenses for Pleasant Bay Alliance. That comes out of free cash every year instead of being put into a budget. Chamber of Commerce, that's one that's voted every year. Snow and ice, we've recently changed to free cash instead of part of our operating budget. So I think we have a long way to go to plan, and I think we've made the right decision by getting through the pandemic year using our stabilization, and that we should be having the FY 2022 conversation later.
Joe, comment on that?
No, my only comment would be, just given that new information that came in last week, I think I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't put this topic on tonight, because the only way you could have used free cash is to waive your policy.
Right.
based on your past actions.
Don, and then I'd like Dana to talk.
I just want to make it clear that Michael and I aren't really disagreeing here, because at the end of the day, if this looks like a house of cards, I'm all in favor of pulling back, not using a different fund to replenish the shortfall. We have to come up with a durable way where we look at a 5-year plan where it's at least at zero and possibly higher than that, but not in negative numbers.
Ed?
Well, you know, I've gone through quite a number of budgets and a number of 5-year plans, and I think there hasn't been a 5-year plan that we've had that didn't show in the out years a deficit, but that becomes your planning information as you move forward, and you make changes as you get closer to those years, so that deficit goes away. You know, I think which pocket we spend it out of is more, I think, one of form rather than substance, because it's if we cover the overage out of free cash or stabilization, it's, you know, one pocket or the other. You know, if you wanted to make a substantial movement towards putting our finances in balance, you'd find a way to reduce the 440 or whatever it's going to turn out to be, rather. But you know, whatever you want to, this board wants to do in terms of which pocket you pay it out of is fine with me.
Michael? And then,
He just mentioned it again, Ed just mentioned it again. It's not 440, unless
No,
I'm wrong.
574.
It's 574
Right.
plus the 140 if the school committee doesn't vote it.
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
right, that's correct.
I just want to make sure we're clear, and the
We're
public's
clear on-
clear on it.
We're clear on that.
You know,
Is this,
yeah.
is this in lieu of not
No,
using stabilization?
Yes, that's what he's proposing.
No, I'm not saying in lieu of stabilization. I'm just saying we will suspend the policy, so on Saturday, if we're at town meeting and we only come up with 65% vote on use of stabilization, we have some place to go to.
Oh, okay.
Right, I'll second
I didn't know where you were coming
Yeah.
from.
Michael?
Now I see where he's going with it.
Yeah.
Joe saw it before because he smiled ahead of time.
It makes me nervous, by the way.
However, if we do that, it is still the intent, walking in the door,
Yep.
the town meeting using stabilization.
Correct. We would
If
continue
the
with Article
motion
4.
fails,
Correct.
we have a mechanism to fund
Oh,
it.
backup.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
That's the intent.
Well, we have two backups. One,
Okay.
using free cash, and two, making
Are we
off
all,
the top of our head reductions on
okay.
And we are not going to do that at 2022's town meeting. We have to come up with a durable way to sustain how we operate.
Yeah. And I think that was Carol's point, that conversions at the end, whether you stabilization, free cash. You'll have to take your point and replenish it.
Well, and
Michael?
just one comment before we vote is simply that shortly after this town meeting, we're gonna be getting a snapshot of next year's budget. And then we're gonna have a good look at what we have and where we're gonna put that money. And that is my only point to waiting and not spending and doing the things the way we used to do, or have been doing.
Okay.
But I would support that motion.
Okay.
I will support that motion.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? I'll go with Steve.
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so you have it, Joe. We'll,
Thank you, I appreciate
keep our
that.
options open.
So the next item, Mr. Chairman, we, as two parties of a contract, we have an obligation to get into a discussion of my goals and objectives for the life of the contract. The document that you had in the packet, I think, is what you as a group had discussed previously. And my thought was maybe we could discuss these generally tonight, but actually confirm them at next week's meeting.
Right. Sounds good.
But I did want to make that aware that we have an obligation to complete that prior to October 1st.
Okay. Any discussion on these? These obviously have to be put together with measures. These were general objectives. Excuse me, Don first.
Actually, I want to flesh out what the chair just said, because I know Michael has been talking about deliverables, but they're not separate and apart from what I'm thinking of. You need, when you do these things, if these are the goals, then what number within that constitutes average performance? What number within that constitutes above average? What number constitutes below average? Whether it's on time or percentage below dollar figure that you're looking at. But these things, as goals in and of themselves, have to be expressed by something that they're tethered to, so you can show whether you're performing really well relating to them or really poorly relating to them.
Steve?
I don't know whether anyone remembers it, but we did work on a rather extensive, how to break down and look at goals, how you rate those, how you figure out the success and failure. It's still there, so take a look at that and see if it allows you to do.
We haven't voted on it, is what I'm saying.
I understand. And my only other comment is, I would like to take a little more time just to look at these, and come back on it, but, that's.
Okay, sounds good. Michael?
So Larry, thank you. And I know I sent you some commentary back.
Right.
There hasn't been a whole lot shared anyway. I'm not sure what other board members have sent back or not sent back. I would ask that, if possible, after town meeting, and maybe we could extend this a week, so that we have a little more thoughtful time to work on this. Joe's obviously very busy, but I'd like to get Joe's thoughts on what's here, and on the measurable part of this. I think that would be constructive to what we're doing. If Joe thinks this is over the top, or if he doesn't think it's enough, I would love to get Joe's feedback on what's here. That's one. Number two, develop FY 2021 budget with 0% tax rate increase. I don't think that that's possible. There's borrowing that we haven't done, and lots of projects with debt service that's going up. I think that we've shown on a chart that there's going to be a tax increase for X amount of years. So Larry, if you could give that some thought. The budget itself, there could be no tax increase. Operating?
Yeah, I put the tax rate because the tax rate does go up rather than absolute, but it's probably not enough. We'll have to play with that.
And I also took that to mean fiscal year 2022.
Yes, and my last point, Larry, is I think that the bottom two, I think that they're all very important, but there has to be a lot of emphasis put on wastewater because of the potential borrowings and because of the mistakes that have been made so far, and the up to $10 million contract that we're going to see to finish what we've already started before we start something else. And then housing, we've put a significant amount of money away for a housing initiative, and breaking some ground would be great.
We need to flesh these out. Joe, I would, if you're agreeable to this, I'd like to give us another week or so, because we're also concentrated on town meeting. Because we have to do, goals aren't any good unless you have ways to measure them, and I think, Steve, you had the format before.
Mhm.
I'm also a little concerned that, in my mind, in the short time we have, these are probably too many goals. We probably should shorten these, the number of goals, and focus on what are our top several objectives that we want to do.
Or minimize the grade for some of the other ones that we only do a
So they're
portion
ranked. So we're not solving world hunger. We have what's most important to us, and pick several and go after that. So that needs some thought as well, I think. Ed?
Yeah, I also have a problem with that, the 0% tax rate increase, because I don't think tax rate is the proper measure of what you may or may not be trying to get at. A tax rate, you can increase spending and have a tax rate actually go down depending on what happens to the assessment of houses, which is what it's based
Right.
on. And I look at the one down, complete procurement actions as soon as possible, and I'm assuming this is referring to the procurement of the large capital items contained in town meeting warrant.
Town meeting, warrant article,
Yeah.
CPA, yeah, right.
I think one of the other projects that we ought to put in, it's sort of fairly specific, but the procurement actions seem to be also somewhat specific, is developing a plan and getting an appraisal on, so we can begin the process of putting the old fire station property on the market as was approved 18 months ago.
And I've actually asked Joe to put that on the agenda again right after town meeting.
Is that Bank Street?
Yeah.
Yes. I do have an update tonight based on last week's comment.
Okay. Michael?
Just 2 comments. Stephen, if you could please redistribute the scoring and the work that you did on
Sure,
that to the rest of the
absolutely.
board, again, to refresh it. And then Larry, or I guess on behalf of Larry, if the rest of the board members, i.e. what Ed just sent, if we send that to Larry
it to
in
me.
writing, and any other comments we have, it's a
Yeah.
lot easier for him to get this done. I remember doing them.
You did it, and I built in the budget up front on part of that.
There's a tremendous amount of work that goes into the measures, and I don't think it's fair for Larry to do it alone.
When we're doing that, could we do what Michael
No.
was discussing, though, and try to identify subordinate goals and objectives that aren't as important in
We need
each
to do
level?
that, because these are too many.
Yeah, I think you need like no more than 3 to 5, but
Right.
if you want to measure more, if they're only 10% of the overall rating, that's fine, but we should probably identify what we consider to be lesser goals.
I would very much appreciate that, because it's not only not fair, it's not the right way to do things. I need comments from you all, so we can put together goals, and especially from Joe, so we're comfortable with, that we have the goals that are meaningful for us, that are achievable, and we can track. Okay? Joe, you and I will talk, and we'll come back. First thing we'll come back is a reasonable deadline, because we've got a lot of things going on.
Thank you. Next topic is, this is actually one of 2 items that is going to come forward, but you will have seen the memorandum in the packet from Roman. So the golf committee met last week, I believe, at the request of Mr. Miller, given the impacts to his business. He was seeking a reduction of his lease payment. I reminded, Roman was aware, but the terms of the license agreement, set this in place, so it will require the board's approval based on the golf committee's recommendation. So they are requesting that the lease payment for the 2020 season be reduced to a payment of $2,700. And that is $900 each for June, July, and August, I believe, if I'm remembering that correctly. And then after that, there will be a similar request that's going to be vetted by the golf committee next month regarding the Hot Stove Saloon restaurant on the golf course. But the golf committee has recommended, and Roman has recommended, that the board consider or recommend, and I apologize, it's $900 in July, August, and September, that the lease payment requirement for that license agreement be changed.
Okay. Ed?
Yeah, I'd move that we concur with the Golf Committee's recommendation that we reduce the payment for the, what is it, golf school, Miller golf lessons at Cranberry Valley be reduced to $2,700 for the 2020 season.
Second for discussion.
Okay, been seconded, Michael?
You know, the only piece that I think is missing here, and I read through this, was his business down? Certainly, we lost the spring.
Right.
But every outdoor activity that I know of is, had substantial increases for the summer season. And even in the golf report, it shows that the golf course did very well, or much better than expected. But given COVID-19, I really don't have a problem voting this now. And because it's in the packet, I'll bring it up. Miller Golf goes on to say in out years, so this contract started 5 years ago at $5,000 and escalated to $6,077. And you would think that out years you would continue to escalate that unless somebody shows you that they're not actually making any money, and that they come back as Cranberry Valley Restaurant did to us and try and negotiate a new deal. And I would suggest to the golf committee that we put this back out to bid, because he's offering to pay us going forward. He paid us in year 4 with no question, $5,788. And Harwich is in the gray again. And starting in the spring, let's hope that there's COVID, everything's relaxed. Why would we want to sign a new lease at $900 a month for 3 months? Is he not going to teach in the spring? So I have a lot of questions for the golf committee if this comes back forward, I guess.
So when this came across my desk, that was the first thing I noticed, that it's technically expiring in October. So I advised Roman that he should get with Griffin, and we'd begin the process, a request for services for anyone that would be willing to do that for a new round of a license agreement, because it is coming to its natural conclusion anyway. Okay. So it, according to the contract or the license agreement language, it ends with October.
This was the last year of the lease.
Or certainly by the, yeah, October 31st is when it expires. It had the renewal years of 19 and 20, so it would still effectively be concluded by October 31st, 2020.
So we have a motion within the recommendation that we look for the golf committee, Michael, to go back and relook at that Gil's initiated.
And the only other piece of this that, you know, he's offering us $900 a month. Does this mean that he's going to stop teaching in September?
I believe his season normally ends in September.
But the license goes till October 31st?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
We have a motion and a second, and some guidance, Joe, for that you're already following up, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, I'll take a vote. Ed, did you have more? Or?
No.
Okay, we'll take a vote. Stephen?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
And I don't know if Roman's on the line for this or not. I don't. We'll move on.
Yeah. Good idea.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the next item should be a quick item, and it's been a long time coming, but you can see really what it is it's one agenda item that has 2 components to it. This is the solar array for the Monomoy Regional High School roof. You may recall as far back as July, we were under the impression that this needed to get expedited. However, council for the town has worked with council for the developers and everybody else involved. And I will have a specific recommendation for the board on 2 items. And our council had confirmed with all the parties that if this is agreed to this evening by the board and the chair is authorized, that will give all the parties the information they need to proceed with their funding tomorrow.
Okay.
So what it really requires is first the board's approval and authorize, I believe we have it set up. Yeah, it would be the board's approval and authorizing the chair to sign the first document known as the, what we're referring to as the,
Recognition.
thank you, recognition and acknowledgement agreement. That was one of the documents that was needed to essentially clear this all up. And then because of that, recommending that the board authorize the chair to sign, if the board votes it, First Amendment to lease agreement for rooftop solar photovoltaic. So by executing the recognition and acknowledgement document that you have in your packet dated September 10th, that would cause us to have the rooftop lease amended to reflect the protections of the town in the rooftop lease. So I'm recommending that the board approve and authorize the chair to sign the recognition and acknowledgement agreement, and then separately, the rooftop lease agreement amendment.
Okay. Ed?
I'd move that we approve the recognition and acknowledgement agreement dated September 10th, 2020, and authorize the chairman of the Board of Selectmen to sign for the town.
Is there a second?
Second.
Steve, okay, it's been moved. Discussion, Michael?
The only question I have, I asked last week if the board could get a copy of what the deal is. I see Liz is on the phone. What is the benefit to the school/town? Are they getting all their electricity? What is the actual deal?
Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, so it's it's a smaller installation on the school roof, to be quite honest. They didn't want to use their entire roof, and it will feed the school power, so it would be avoided cost of electricity, and the approximate amount each year is about $40,000 that it would save the school in typical electric costs.
Yeah, Michael, you probably have my question.
When you talk about typical electric costs, Liz, what's included in typical electric costs? Does that include the delivery
We did our pro
charges?
forma when electricity costs 20 cents per kilowatt hour. Frankly, it's been going down a little bit, which is the good news. And when the when the cost of electricity goes down, so does the benefit, essentially. So if your cost of electricity goes down, there's not quite as much benefit because the payment to the developer remains the same. I would let you know, though, that the opportunity that we got with the developer was a knockout in terms of power purchase agreement offers. It was very, very good. So it's a very nice offer from Distributed Solar Development.
Thank you, Liz. I guess where I'm going with this is, and I know in a lot of people that lease solar panels, the production costs exceed the delivery costs on your electric bill. Therefore, the savings really are very, very, very minimal. Are there production costs associated with this? And is it going to be a real $40,000 savings to the town and Monomoy Regional High School, or is it not?
So that 43 is the net benefit. So there's going to be, sorry about the frog, there's about 228,000 kilowatt hours of production. And for each kilowatt hour production, there's a payment to the developer. But you're also offsetting your cost of electricity. So you do the math of the cost to the developer, and you also do the math on the savings of electricity, and it's the net benefit. That is the net benefit.
Okay.
Does that make sense, Michael?
Yeah, so the net benefit, projected net benefit to the school system is $43,000.
40, 43, I mean, yeah, again, we're in the process of, they're in the process of building, and until we have an as-built, we want to remain in the world of approximate kilowatt hours of production.
Okay.
Because, well, we know pretty much what it's going to be. We're not there yet.
Okay, so I asked last week, I'd ask again, can I get a copy of this proposal?
Do you want the pro forma, or what is it that you're looking for?
Everything.
Or the PPA from DSD?
I want everything related to what the school savings and what the agreement says.
Okay, well, and shall I share that through Joe, or how would you like me to get all that to you?
Through Joe.
Yeah.
I'd be interested, not in the whole thing, but the pro forma I'd be interested in.
Okay.
Yeah, but I
Through
think,
Joe.
Is that okay?
Absolutely. Yep, I think it's good.
Okay.
Thank you,
And
Liz.
I'll also,
Yep, thank you,
of course,
Liz.
the agreements are in hand, but I'll make sure, oh, they wouldn't be in hand for you, that's true, because they're with Monomoy, so I'll make sure you get a copy of the
Thank you, Liz.
PPA too.
Okay.
All
I
right,
have a motion and a second on the record. The recognition acknowledgement, take a roll call vote. Don?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. So that's now moving, Joe, we have the second part you were
And
starting to
same
speak
request
to.
for the
Same-
rooftop
same
lease agreement amendment.
Ed?
Mr. Chair, I'd move that we approve a rooftop lease agreement between a rooftop solar photovoltaic energy facility between Oak Street Solar Project 2019 LLC, the Monomoy Regional School District.
Is there a second?
And the
Second.
chair be authorized.
Chair
Chair
is
be-
authorized.
okay. And Joel, same discussion. This has been vetted by council and,
Correct. Matt followed up with me last week, confirmed with Griffin and Bob that everything is as it should be and the town is protected.
okay. Michael?
Are we actually voting on on a lease agreement, or are we voting on a lease agreement amendment?
So we're asking the other parties to amend their rooftop lease agreement so that what we just did under recognition and acknowledgement, our protections are incorporated into their document.
So all the motion should state is that we're voting on the amendment.
Correct. The rooftop lease agreement, First Amendment.
Okay.
First
Is that the
amendment.
motion?
Is that's
Well,
the
I said-
motion?
I said First Amendment to the lease, yeah.
Okay.
So,
And Don, you're okay with, you seconded it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's fine with me.
Michael, you okay?
Yep.
Steve, any comment? I'll take a roll call vote. Don?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Thank you. That took a while, and I guess we met your deadline at the end of the day, huh?
And Mr. Chairman, you have those documents in your packet to sign. Moving on to contracts. I'm going to make a statement, but then I had a question. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Tim. I had a question for our procurement guru, Griffin. But what you see in front of you, this request is to execute an agreement with Colonial Municipal Group for the purchase of a one-ton dump truck for the DPW. The amount is $79,917.65. This actually goes back to a procurement that was authorized by a vote of town meeting at the annual town meeting in 2019. Griff, the only thing I didn't see is if you had a chance to share this with the finance director as to the availability of funds. That was the only component that's missing tonight.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, everyone. So what's in your packet doesn't have the finance director's signature. She signed it late in the day on Friday, and it just didn't get a chance to get in the packet. What's in the selectmen's hands, what should be in your hands, is the one that is signed by Carol.
Perfect, thank you. So I am recommending that we confirm the procurement as done by Griffin with Kyle, and that this be approved by the board.
Any questions, comments? Michael?
I move that we approve and execute agreement with Colonial Municipal Group for the purchase of a one-ton dump truck for the Department of Public Works for $79,917.65 as presented.
Second.
Second. Any further discussion, Michael?
I appreciate the add-on at the end here. I know that we're extremely busy with town meeting preparation. We have agreed that we would have in the packet a recommendation, and unless we're changing that, I'd like to make sure on these contracts that we have the town administrator's recommendation going forward, as well as Carol's signature in the packet before the meeting. But I
understand and I
absolutely
agree.
understand that we're busy.
But you're absolutely right, and we'll endeavor to always have that going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. No further discussion. We have a motion and a second. I'll take a roll call. Don?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so. Moving on to town administrator.
Town administrator's report, I'll try to be as succinct as possible. First, I want to start with the Main Street Fire Station. Based on comments from previous meetings, I did have a conversation with staff. The next steps that we'll take, we have to work on the abatement of both asbestos within the building. It's not significant, but it does need to be abated, and I believe also the abatement of lead paint. Abatement of underground storage has already taken place, so those are the next two things that we're working on from procurement, and that will lead us to the next step of demolition. I'm hoping to get the abatements done before the freeze comes in, and potentially do the demolition after, if there's any snow or frost, that all melts. And I will
So-
continue to update the board.
Okay, so now you're looking for costs of doing the abatements, is that?
We have the costs. We have all the reports and information. Now we just actually need to procure the services to get that done.
Okay.
I've already told staff to start cleaning out the building, so whatever's left in there, we understand to be rubbish.
Just to follow up on that.
Yeah.
And then after that, a procurement process, or decision on a procurement process on what we're gonna do with the land?
Correct, right. That would be as I understand it, it is in concert with the town meeting article that led to the
They
funding of
give
all
some
this.
direction on that.
Yep, absolutely. Then within your package, you would have seen the DPW Director and Facilities Manager came to me several weeks ago. You know, when we hired Robin Smith, who's doing a fantastic job. They had interviewed 2 people. They had 2 great candidates, but they could only pick one. Link made me aware about a week and a half ago that there was a retirement due to health considerations. So we had an immediate need to fill custodian. We worked off of the most recent list that was done about a month ago, and I'm very pleased to announce that Greg Bailey is the individual that Link has recommended that I hire. He's ready, willing, able to start. He's willing to start October 19th. I told him about the 14-day period, but he also has to have a conversation with his employer. But this brings us to a full complement, as has always been budgeted for custodians, and as you know, it's a critical need as we continue on in pandemic.
Okay.
And then last but not least, tying back to procurements, I signed an agreement with Structures North. That's the engineering firm that Griffin and Dave Spitz and Sean Libby met with last week at Brooks Academy Museum. This is also tied to a procurement through town meeting, and so we're moving on that. They had a walkthrough last Thursday, and that's what this contract gets to.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Any questions for Joe? If not,
Looking forward to seeing
Selectmen's
everybody Saturday morning at
Saturday
town
morning
meeting.
not at 8, but at 9.
A little
Selectmen's
before that, because we got to sign in.
Details.
Don't have to sign
Go
it.
through Selectmen's reports, Don,
Nothing.
Ed,
No.
Michael?
Just a question for the interview committee. It's, and I guess through, and town administrator. Several people have called from committees I'm the liaison to, and they're looking, actually in some cases panicked because they don't have enough to make a quorum, and that they feel like there's some business that they need to do. So is there a meeting coming up?
Yep.
Okay, good.
That's one. Number 2, because of the pandemic and because of the remote participation, it has been said that some of these people are dropping off these committees because they can't do remote participation. Is there anything in the near future that would allow committees to meet in person as we do? And that's a question to
yeah,
Joe, and I
I
don't
mean-
need the answer tonight, but
Yeah, it's
I
more.
would love that to be a goal myself.
It's more for our public health director based on what's allowed under the governor's orders. But I will remind everybody that when Governor Baker announced on March 10th that there was going to be this restriction, the requirement is that if they have to meet remotely, they don't have to do it by this mechanism, doesn't have to be televised, but they have to take every extraordinary effort to create a transcript. So there's any number of ways they could do it, and they could also do it remotely by telephone if they wanted to. So we can look at all those options. The critical point of that in the open meeting law is the output to the general public, is showing that what their deliberations were.
Larry, I would ask that, given that we are pretty much a committee-run town, and we seem to be losing people fairly rapidly, that we top it and put this on an agenda, and then outline somehow or another and get it to all of our committee chairs, so that they can have people rest easy, that they will be able to meet, not just on a Zoom or a conference call.
Okay. Don and then Ed?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If Michael would chime in if I'm missing something. I know for a fact that Waterways is a critical problem right now, the Waterways Committee, and the Zoning Board of Appeals. They're using an alternate to be able to get up to their quorum. Thankfully, they have them, but we need one alternate and one full-time person there, so we need 2 no matter what happens.
And we're also reevaluating the technology that we use to make sure we've got the easiest to use for everybody.
Thank you, that was all.
I'm good.
Are there other committees, though? Or
Yeah, I'll send you guys an email.
I know from a couple of other groups that I'm involved with, they're committees, but they're not town committees. that we've tried to set up doing the meetings by Zoom and have taken to having them in the park, because even though some of the older members understand the technology of how to do the Zoom, they just can't hear on it. It's, you know, their hearing has deteriorated to the point that it doesn't come across that medium well, so if they're going to be involved, they have to do it in face-to-face, and I think we ought to look for a way to do that, because, you know, we all know we're not the youngest town in the Commonwealth.
Okay, thank you. Steve?
I got nothing.
We'll see everyone. I'm hoping we see a huge turnout at Joe, you've guaranteed good weather, and so
Wonderful weather
far,
on tap.
your guarantee.
The only thing I'll be held responsible for.
Still the
is
same
weather.
temperature that you gave.
66 degrees, 9 miles out of the northwest.
Motion to adjourn?
Adjourn in a second. All in favor?
Thank you.